Hey guys, so getting into this video, I've talked about books that I've read recently, but I haven't really talked about some of my actual favorite books. And according to Goodreads, since I started tracking my reading around 2021, 2022, I've read a total of 247 books. So today we're going to talk about some of my all-time favorite must-read books. These are the books I love the most, the ones I still think about, and the ones I would actually recommend you pick up. Let's get into it. Okay, so starting with Project Hail Mary, I sadly don't have a copy of this book because I lent it out to my uncle. So to my uncle, if you're watching this, please keep my baby safe. This is actually one of the first books I read when I was getting back into reading my senior year of high school. So it's kind of crazy that it's still so high on this list, even though I read it so early on. Project Hail Mary was also recently adapted into a movie that came out this year in March. It stars Ryan Gosling, and I talked about it in my last video where I went over all the movies I watched in the first quarter of 2026. So if you're interested in watching that, I'll link that down below. Actually, I watched it the day it came out, which I don't do with a lot of movies, and in my opinion, it was such an amazing adaptation, and I believe it was really true to the book. But if you don't know what Project Hail Mary is about, then I'll go ahead and tell you. We're basically following a man named Rylan Grace. He wakes up on a spaceship with no memory of who he is, where he is, and why he's there. And slowly he starts to piece together that he's been sent on this mission because Earth is basically facing an extinction level crisis, and he alone might be the only person that can save humanity.
I put the knot in astronaut. I've never done anything. I've never done a space. I can't even moonwalk.
Now, I know that sounds very intense and sciencey, which may be good if you're a sci-fi reader, obviously. But if you're not, I feel like Andy Weir has such a way of making science feel fun and readable. Like, yeah, there are some moments where I'm like, I don't know if I'm fully understanding what's happening here, but somehow I was still having the best time. And of course, this movie starts off as a space survival mystery, but it definitely is a lot more emotional and heartfelt than you expect. It's stressful and it's heartwarming, and it has one of my favorite friendships I've ever read in a book. And of course, I don't want to say too much because I think part of the fun is discovering it as you read the book. If you've seen the Project Hail Mary trailer, then unfortunately, I think you already know. I hated that. When I watched the trailer, I was like, no, they spoiled one of the best parts, I think, that you get to discover while reading. But if you don't know, please go into it blind. But yeah, by the end of this book, I was tearing up a little bit. And yeah, this is definitely a great sci-fi book for people, especially who don't like sci-fi. And this is just one of those books that reminds me why I love reading. I remember finishing it and being like, that was so good. I need everybody to read this. And of course, everybody's reading it now. So if you haven't already, what are you doing? I definitely clearly recommend this one because I don't even have my copy because I lent it out because I just need that many more people to read it. Also, the book is written by Andy Weir, and he also wrote The Martian, which was adapted into a film starring Matt Damon. I haven't watched the movie or read the book. I have a copy of the book that I got for Christmas. I've heard a lot of people compare it, say it's just as good, so that may be one I should read next. So next we're going from sciencey survival with Project Hail Mary to full-on violent space opera with the Red Rising series written by Pierce Brown. So we have the original trilogy with Red Rising, Golden Sun, Morning Star, and that trilogy basically tells the first major arc of Darrow's story. And then the saga continues with Iron Gold, Dark Age, which has a bookmark in it because my mom is reading this one, and finally Lightbringer. Now, I must give a fair warning. This series is eventually supposed to end with book 7, Red God, but as of right now, there's no official release date. I'm hoping it comes out this year, but who knows? This series is just so fun, and I mean fun in the most stressful, brutal, anxiety-inducing way possible. Now, this first book gives very much Hunger Games survival competition vibes, and I've actually heard a lot of people say this book is too similar to the Hunger Games. I have to disagree. I can understand the comparison, and I do think it takes some inspiration from that dystopian competition setup, but I think the world, the characters, and the overall story really stand on their own. And honestly, this first book is just the tip of the iceberg. If you read the first book and you're like, it was good, but I don't know if I'm obsessed yet, I would really recommend continuing because the series gets so much bigger after that. It starts off feeling more contained, but then it expands into this massive story about rebellion, politics, war, power, betrayal, and class systems. So yeah, basically the lore is getting deeper and the stakes are getting higher as the series goes on. And the basic premise of this story is that society is divided into this caste system based on colors, with gold gold's at the very top and then red's at the very bottom. Darrow, our main character that we're following, is a red, and he finds out that basically everything he thought he knew about his life and his purpose was a lie. From there, he gets pulled into this much bigger mission to infiltrate the ruling class and help bring down the system from the inside. One of my favorite things about this series is the relationship between the characters. There's found family, really deep friendships, loyalty, betrayal, complicated alliances, and because the relationships are so strong, the emotional moments hit that much harder. This series will absolutely rip your heart out. Pierce Brown is not afraid to kill off the characters that you love, and honestly, no one is safe from I mean, because this is a story about war, it does make sense in that context why so much death is happening. And then there's Darrow. Darrow is such an interesting main character because sorry, this song I'm listening to is Darrow is such an interesting main character because he's fighting for the good of the people, but he's not always morally easy to root for. He'll make decisions that will have you questioning him, and sometimes you're like, sir, what are we doing? He's not supposed to be this perfectly likable, morally pure hero. He's angry, he's grieving, he's strategic, he's ruthless when he needs to be, and his character gets so much more layered as the series goes on. I also think Pierce Brown is really good at writing tension and momentum. These books are so dramatic. There's always some betrayal, battle, political move, or insane twist happening. So they're pretty easy to binge, even though some of them are pretty chunky. Yeah, and this series definitely has some of the most stressful plot twists I've ever read. Also, if you follow Pierce Brown on social media, he's genuinely really funny, and he knows how much emotional damage he's caused his readers. So yeah, if you like war and politics and tense moments, I mean, come on, Red Rising has it all. It's emotional damage, but it's fun emotional damage. Next, we have the Hierarchy series by James Islington. As of right now, there are 2 books out, The Will of the Many and The Strength of the Few. There's a 3rd book in the works, and as far as I know, at least 4 planned. I love long series though, so I have no complaints, although I'm sorry for recommending another non-completed series, guys. But this series is absolutely crazy. I genuinely feel like James Islington is like a freaking genius, because I have no clue how he even came up with the concept for this. The world is so unique, and the whole power system is one of those things where the more you think about it, the more insane it gets. The series is set in this Roman-inspired society where people at the bottom of the hierarchy literally give part of their strength, energy, or will to the people above them. It has fantasy, class politics, and of course, academy competition. I mean, I know that's kind of the same as Red Rising, but I promise they're different. Secret identities, rebellion, and so much political scheming. Now, I will say, when I had my mom read this one, she was like, it feels so samey to other fantasy books. So that might be a complaint some people would have with this one, but I just thought the magic system and the world that we were in was so unique that I really didn't even notice the similarities to other fantasy books that are out. But let me just tell you what it's about. So the first book, we follow our main character Viz, and he's hiding who he really is. He ends up at this elite academy where he has to compete with children of the ruling class while also getting pulled into all these secrets and conspiracies. Also, I love a smart main character. Viz is constantly lying, calculating, and observing, and he's trying to figure out who he can trust, which is basically no one. I also feel like I'm always learning new things from theories that other readers post online. There are so many little details and connections that I wouldn't have thought of on my own, and I love when a series makes me spiral like that. Oh, and the ending of book 1, jaw on the floor. I immediately told my mom that she has to read this because I needed someone to talk to about it. And the series only gets more complex as it goes on. And again, the setting is so unique and cool to picture in my head. I feel like the paths this series can take as it continues are endless. I'm really excited to see where the author takes it. So if you like a fantasy that feels really ambitious and a main character that's constantly playing mental chess with everyone around him, I would highly recommend this series. It's one of those series where I'm entertained but confused in the best way. Okay, so next up, I'm not going to be talking about anything new because it is a booktube/book talk classic, but it's a classic for a reason, and that is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I have the old covers, well, most of them. I think minus, let me count, hold on. Okay, I just checked and I'm missing Queen of Shadows. So if you guys know anybody who's selling Queen of Shadows for a somewhat reasonable price, the old covers, let me know. But yeah, I have those, and then I also have the newer covers that came out in 2023. I feel like the fandom is very divided on whether they prefer the older character covers or the newer illustrated ones. Personally, I think they're both pretty, but I didn't start reading the series until 2023, so I don't have that nostalgia connected to them. And if you're wondering, you started reading the series in 2023, why do you have the older covers? These older covers are actually my mom's, so. And my favorite covers are actually the white ones, like the UK white ones. I think they were published in the UK. They are so stunning, but they're like hundreds and hundreds of dollars if I ever wanted to get them, so no thanks. But getting into the actual series, I wasn't that big of a fan of the first book. I thought it was okay, but it's definitely small in comparison to what the series becomes. The series starts with this assassin competition, and then it has some palace politics and romance and this mystery that we're following and trying to solve. But as the series goes on, it evolves into this, I'm talking huge fantasy world with magic, war, kingdoms, fae, witches, ancient history, and lots of different characters and storylines. I think that's one of the reasons the series is loved so much, because you start the series with just one character, Selena, and by the end, it just feels so massive. And another thing is, me and so many other people that love this series love it because of the found family. It's not very often, at least I feel like, in books where the main characters and the side characters are loved completely equally. Everyone has their own developed storyline, their own traumas, their own relationships, and their own bigger role in the story. Sometimes you have that one character where if you see their like name in the title header, you're just like, oh, I want to skip this one. But I never felt that way with any of the characters. I was genuinely invested in all of them. Now, there were characters that I did favor over others, but I was never dreading a character's story. And my mom and I both agree that Manon has to be one of the best side characters of all time. Her arc is honestly incredible. She starts off as this cold, brutal, terrifying character, and I believe that her storyline becomes one of the most emotional and compelling parts of the series. And then, of course, we have our main character, Selena. I love her as a main character. She's such a badass. And I've yet to read another fantasy character that is as unapologetically confident and dramatic and powerful as she is. And she is cocky, she's secretive, she's messy, and she does, you know, along the way make some questionable decisions, but you know, the more you learn about her, the more you realize why she is the way she is. She's traumatized and angry, but she's also loyal and she's brave, and she's constantly trying to carry the weight of who she's supposed to be. I mean, her character development is, again, another thing with Manon's storyline. It's just a part of the series that is really strong for me. And lastly, before I get on to the next book, this is kind of a debate I've heard, especially recently. A lot of people would call this series romantasy, and I think I'd have to disagree with that. Now that I've actually read more of what people would consider staples in the romantasy genre, I'd have to say this just isn't one. And yes, there is romance in this series, and I do like the romance, but it's definitely not a main part of the story. And romance is an aspect in so many people's lives, so of course it's included. That part of the story was great, but I also loved the plot, the friendships, the magic, the war, and of course, like I said, the character arc of all the characters that we follow. This series is also definitely a commitment. It is 8 books, but I personally love long series, and not every author does this. I feel like you have to really be a good author, but when it's a long series, it feels rewarding because you spend so much time with these characters that by the end, they really do feel like people you've gone on an entire journey with, and it just makes the emotional moments hit harder. Now, some people have very strong opinions on how to read this series. I feel like the way that I read it set me up really well for the ending, and it gave me a lot of the emotional impact. I'm not saying I'm the end-all be-all authority on how you should read this series, but if you'd like to know how I read it in this order. Throne of Glass first, Crown of Midnight, the short story collection, The Assassin's Blade, then Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, and then I tandem read Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. And basically I read them together using a chapter by chapter reading guide. And if y'all are interested, I'll include that reading guide down below. But of course, then I finished with Kingdom of Ash. And honestly, I really liked reading The Assassin's Blade, which is kind of like the prequel to the whole series, but I liked reading it after Crown of Midnight. A lot of people say to read it first, but for me, reading it third made the emotional impact stronger because I already cared about Selena, so I wanted to know more about her past in this story. And I know it might be a little unhinged to tandem read these 2 books together because they are humongous, so it is a bit of a task. However, I felt like this just made the pacing a lot easier for my brain to understand, because these books take place at the same time. They're just from different perspectives. So again, this is probably not going to be for everyone. It's a lot. Just do what's best for your brain. And yeah, Throne of Glass may not be a perfect series, but I don't care. I was attached to the characters. And like I said, I didn't read this during the time that it was coming out and releasing, but I did get that nostalgic feel from these books still. If you haven't read this series already, which I feel like a lot of people in the fantasy space probably already have, please check it out if anything I mentioned sounds interesting to you. I really do think it's worth the commitment of 8 books. And of course, the ending was amazing. It felt like everything we had been reading was building up to that final book, and the payoff felt really well earned. But yeah, there's not much I can say about this series that hasn't already been said by a million other people. But again, I get why it's so loved. So with that being said, let's move on. Now, this next book is definitely a tonal shift from the others. We're getting into the pretentious dark academia, morally questionable section, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I think this is one of the books that really got me into literary fiction. Donna Tartt's writing is just so amazing. I talked about The Goldfinch in a previous video, and like I said there, I would literally read her grocery list. And The Secret History follows a group of wealthy students at a college in Vermont who are a part of this oddly very exclusive ancient Greek class, and then they become involved in a murder. And the book pretty early on, I mean literally the first page tells you what's going on. We know what happened, so the mystery isn't really who did it, it's more about how these characters got to that point. And I would say this book is one of the foundations of the dark academia genre. It has the secluded college setting, the mysterious students, the obsession with beauty and intelligence, the morally questionable friend group, and the secrets and the downfall. And while it's cold and academic in its setting, it's also kind of glamorous in this unsettling way. I will say this is not for everyone. I mean, I did call it pretentious earlier, but I love that about the book, but some people might not. Some people call it heavy-handed, and I could definitely see where those critiques come from. I mean, these characters are privileged and they're selfish. They're obsessive and detached from reality in a lot of ways. I don't know, I love books about people making terrible decisions, so. And I definitely do think our main character, Richard, is such an interesting character to follow because he wants so badly to belong in this group. He romanticizes this group so much that even when there's red flags, he keeps getting pulled further in. You're watching him become obsessed with this exclusive world, and you know the whole time that something is definitely off. And the atmosphere, again, it's just so vibey. I listened to this book a majority at work or going to work, and I just felt like I was transported to that college in Vermont. Also, Donna Tartt narrates the audiobook herself, and she does it so well. I mean, you can write amazingly and you can narrate audiobooks beautifully.
Save some for the rest of us.
But yeah, definitely wouldn't recommend this going into it for a fast-paced thriller. Even though there is murder, it's more of a slow literary character study about guilt, obsession, class, moral decay. This is just one of those books that I feel like you need to savor. The chapters are long. If you're one of those people that don't like long chapters, just okay. Maybe don't. Well, it's got like breaks in the chapters, so maybe you can stop there. But Donna Tartt definitely really takes her time with this story. So yeah, if you like dark academia, toxic friend groups, and books where everyone involved probably needs therapy, then I think this is worth reading. Now, lastly, I'm going to read the first paragraph of this book because it's genuinely one of my favorite openings of a novel ever. The snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of her situation. He'd been dead for 10 days before they found him, you know. It was one of the biggest manhunts in Vermont history. State troopers, the FBI, even an army helicopter, the college closed, the dye factory in Hampton shut down, people coming from New Hampshire, upstate New York, as far away as Boston. So yeah, if you're intrigued already, definitely run and check it out from your library or from a bookstore, however you prefer. So next we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Unfortunately, I read this one through ebook and audiobook, so I don't have the physical copy. And this is one of the Gothic classics on this list. I really love Gothic classics, although I can't say I've read many, so give me your suggestions in the comments. And this book is just another one that is very atmospheric. I could vividly picture the setting in my head. And basically the story follows a young woman who, interestingly enough, I didn't realize until later that she's actually never named, but basically she marries a wealthy widower named Maxim de Winter, and she moves into his estate named Manderley. It also has one of the most famous opening lines.
Last night, I dreamt I went to Manderley again.
And honestly, that line sets the tone so well because Manderley has this huge presence in the story. And once the narrator gets to the estate, she realizes that Maxim's first wife, Rebecca, is basically haunting the entire place. And this haunting is not literal, but her presence is everywhere. Rebecca is dead before the story even starts, but she is definitely one of the most powerful, what am I even saying? She's one of the most powerful characters. The book is literally named after her, guys. And everyone remembers her, and everyone compares this new wife, the narrator, to her. And the estate feels like it still belongs to Rebecca. And du Maurier does a great job of making this house feel romantic yet uncomfortable and haunting. It's beautiful, but it's also suffocating. It's not scary in a jump scare sort of way. It's psychologically unsettling because we can see how insecure and how isolated the narrator is. So yeah, if you like stories like this with a big mysterious estate, an anxious narrator, and some family secrets, just an overall sense that something is wrong beneath the beauty, then I would definitely recommend Rebecca. Another Gothic classic we have is Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. Now, this recently got a movie adaptation this year, but from what I've seen, it seems so far off base from the source material that I honestly think I would be angry if I watched it. I've seen clips of it, and if you take it as more of a retelling or its own thing, maybe it's interesting. I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it's for me personally. But moving on to the actual classic, Wuthering Heights follows Heathcliff and Catherine. And if you're like me and you didn't know anything about the story going into it, you might assume it's this grand, sweeping love story. And it is intense, but I would really not describe it as romantic in any sort of healthy way. It's much more messy, obsessive, codependent, and destructive. Almost everybody in this book is terrible and selfish, but that's what makes it so interesting. But you just can't stop reading because you're just wondering how much worse it can possibly get. And of course, as with any Gothic classic, the setting is absolutely wonderful. It's set on the Yorkshire moors, and everything feels very isolated and stormy and miserable, and the house itself feels very harsh and eerie. So as long as you don't go into this expecting a sweet classic romance, and you just love that drama and low-key toxicity sometimes. Not saying I want in every book, but sometimes time to time you're like, okay, I want it. If that sounds like your type of book. Wuthering Heights. Time to enter the weird girl lit portion of this video. Now, I love weird girl fiction, but this is the only book in that genre that managed to make it to my favorites. If you guys would like a video of my weird girl fiction recommendations, just let me know. I definitely have a few I'd like to share with you guys. This book is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa moshfegh, and I will say this is a weirdly, deeply personal book to me. I feel like it kind of ruined my life, and maybe not in a good way. So I do want to say, if you have any triggers or you're dealing with depression, please go into this book with caution because it could have some difficult themes for you. So My Year of Rest and Relaxation follows a young woman living in New York in the 2000s, and I really do love books that take place around that time. Basically, she decides that she wants to sleep for an entire year, and she's beautiful, wealthy, has an apartment in Manhattan, and she technically has everything that should make her life feel fine, but she is depressed, detached from the world, and emotionally numb. So she starts seeing this wildly irresponsible psychiatrist who prescribes her an insane amount of medication, and she uses that medication to hibernate her way into becoming a new person. And this is definitely not a book where you're supposed to love the main character. She is judgmental, mean, and selfish. Honestly, she's just overall kind of awful, but that's definitely the point. She's written as someone who is so disconnected from herself and everyone around her that she would rather disappear from her life entirely than live in it. And yeah, the subject matter is bleak, but the book is also weirdly funny. The humor is very dry and uncomfortable, and a lot of the complaints that I see about this book include that there's not really a plot. I would say so. There is really not a super heavy plot. It's definitely more about the character herself, and it's meant to touch on these topics of depression and grief, privilege, loneliness, and numbness. So it's very much not for everyone, but it was for me at the time that I read it. So if you want to emotionally disassociate along with our main character for 300 so pages, then this is definitely one that I would recommend. The next book is The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin, and this is definitely a more wholesome step up from the last book. After talking about a book where the main character wants to sleep her way through life, this one feels like the opposite. It's about someone who has kind of given up, but slowly gets pulled back into living. This story follows A.J. Fikry, and he is a grumping, grieving bookstore owner on a small island. And at the beginning of this story, he's very isolated and bitter, but then something happens that completely changes the direction of his life. And what I love about this book is it is such a book lover book. It takes place around this little independent bookstore, and the whole story feels like a love letter to reading, to booksellers, and the way that books can connect people. And it's about grief, found family, second chances, and people coming into your life at exactly the moment you don't realize you need them. You get to watch AJ slowly open himself back up to the world and build this little community around himself. And yeah, it's cozy and sentimental, but I wouldn't consider it too fluffy because it definitely has this sadness to it. It feels small and quiet, but definitely by the end of it, it sneaks up on you emotionally. I remember reading it on like the Kindle app on my computer, and I was just like clicking. I never read on my computer, but at that time it was like the easiest source available to me, so I was like, let me read as much as I can. I do think this one made me cry. Yeah, I definitely think I cried at the end of this one. If you just love grumpy but lovable characters and small town communities, then this is definitely a really lovely one to check out. Gabrielle Zevin herself actually has a list of all the books and references that are in this on her website, so that was really fun to look at, and I love when authors include book titles because I'm more intrigued to check them out if an author I love loves it. Next we have a thriller called Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. I read this book from the library, however I believe it was one of the books that I read immersively, so listening to the audiobook while reading it physically, that's honestly my preferred method of reading now because my attention span is shit, so that was fun. And this book follows Louise, a single mom who starts having an affair with her new boss, David, and things become complicated when she becomes friends with his wife, Adele, and she gets pulled into this really weird, tense dynamic between the two. At first, it definitely feels standard domestic thriller. You know, mysterious wife, marriage that has something wrong with it, secrets you're trying to figure out. Now, I would call myself someone who is pretty experienced with thrillers. There's not much that can shock me twist-wise anymore, but this twist is one that I don't think anybody could guess coming. There's probably going to be someone who's like, I saw it coming, but I don't know, I was glad to have the rug pulled out from under me. And it does have a trope for that twist that a lot of people don't like. This is definitely gonna have one of those endings where you're like, that was insane and I loved it, or absolutely not, I'm mad. Personally, because I'm just so used to certain types of thriller twists, I preferred that it went somewhere unexpected. I love when a thriller commits to being completely unhinged. And this is definitely one of those books that you should go into as blind as possible. Don't Google the ending or read any spoilers. The reveal is really the whole experience. Also, if you're interested, there is a Netflix adaptation, but I can't recommend it because I haven't watched it and I don't really know how faithful it is to the story, but I personally, because I have an attachment to it, of course would recommend reading the book first. So if you like messy relationships, unreliable narrators, and endings that make you go, what? Then I would definitely recommend Behind Her Eyes. Next up is a thriller that is more widely known, and it is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Oh my god, guys, put the damn pitchfork. What the fuck is a pitchfork? Oh my god, guys, put the damn pitchforks down, please. I know Colleen Hoover is controversial in the bookish space, but to be fair, I read this before that was more widely talked about, I believe, and before I was really deep into that niche of book internet. Also, opinion warning, Colleen Hoover actually wrote one of the worst books I've ever read. Ugly Love. Anyways, so Verity follows a struggling writer named Lowen, and she gets hired to finish a best-selling author's book series after that author, named Verity Crawford, is injured and unable to complete it. So Lowen goes to her house to look through her notes and her outlines, but while she's there, she finds this disturbing manuscript that Verity wrote about her own life. And from there, the book becomes this creepy, messy, domestic thriller. And This book is probably nothing shocking to the average thriller reader, but I read it early on in my endeavors of reading, and I pulled an all-nighter to finish it. I don't think since this book I've had many stories do that to me. Like, barely looking at my phone, barely wanting to do anything else, which is saying something because I am addicted to my phone. And yeah, that's why this book stuck with me. Is it the most perfectly written thriller of all time? No. Is it subtle? Absolutely not. But it is extremely readable. It has that I need to know what happens next quality to it. And this is one of those books. My cat wanted to join. This is one of those books where the conversation around it is almost as big as the book itself. I mean, people argue about the characters, people argue about the ending, and people argue about whether it's even good. And I get why. It's very divisive. I don't know if I would rate it the same way if I were to read it now, but at the time it did exactly what I needed it to do. I'm also really intrigued by the upcoming movie adaptation. I watched another Colleen Hoover adaptation, It Ends With Us. That was not my thing personally. I've heard really bad things about Reminders of Him. I read that book and was like middle of the road with it. But this one I'm excited because it has Anne Hathaway as Verity and Dakota Johnson as Lowen. I am not sure. I feel like Anne Hathaway is going to do a great job playing Anne Hathaway.
Literally, what am I talking about? Anne Hathaway playing Anne Hathaway. I meant playing Verity. What the hell?
Because she kind of gives that glamorous and mysterious yet disturbing vibe. And I'm really interested, of course, to see how Dakota is going to play the anxious and observant Lowen and like the quiet tension that's going on in that house. So yes, I know it's controversial. I know it's Colleen Hoover. I know some people hate this book, but I had a really fun reading experience with it. And sometimes I feel like that has to count for something. To get a little darker, we have the Mindfuck series by S.T. Abbey. Yes, stabby. Very subtle and iconic. This is the Mystic Box version of it. Isn't she gorgeous? Now, before I even get into this, please check trigger warnings. It is very dark and deals with some very heavy topics. This is definitely not going to be for everyone. But the premise is basically, Lana Myers is a woman who is secretly hunting down and killing the men connected to something horrific that happened in her past. And while she's doing that, she starts dating Logan Bennett, who is an FBI profiler investigating the murders, not knowing that the person he's falling for is literally the woman committing them. So conceptually, this is insane, right? Every interaction has this extra layer of tension because you're like, girl, how are you getting away with this? And yeah, this series is just so crazy and fun. It may not have the best writing. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like it's literary perfection, but I had a hell of a good time reading it. It's very fast-paced and dramatic, and one of those series where you start it and then suddenly you read the whole thing. The only downside I would say is, oh, I'm holding it like upside down and backwards. The only downside I would say is the ending. It's very outlandish, but I mean, I can't say I didn't enjoy the ride there. I mean, the whole series is already over the top, so I mean, by the time I got to the ending, I was like, you know what, why not? Again, this is another series, and I have the bind up, but it is multiple books in one. I don't know if I would rate it as high now that I have more books under my belt. Maybe I'm due for a reread. Maybe that's a vlog idea? Let me know if you guys would be interested in that. But overall, if you like revenge stories, morally gray women, serial killer thrillers, forbidden romance, and books that are basically one long chaotic binge read, this series is definitely entertaining. But again, please check the trigger warning. Honestly, this book is not as dark as a lot of the dark romances I've seen online. I'm really not a dark romance fan at all. I actually kind of quite dislike it, so this is really not too heavy if you are a dark romance reader, but if you're not, check your trigger warnings, please. On the lighter side, we have Funny Story by Emily Henry, which I've previously said this is my favorite Emily Henry book, but I've only read 3 Emily Henry books: Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, and this one. So let me know which Hen book I need to read next. So Funny Story follows Daphne, whose fiance leaves her for her childhood best friend, which now that I'm thinking about it, that kind of sounds like the plot of Beach Read, but make it reverse. Anyways, so her fiance leaves her for his childhood best friend, and his childhood best friend's name is Petra. And because of that breakup, Daphne ends up moving in with Petra's ex, Miles. So yeah, it's basically about the two people who got dumped by the people who are now dating each other while trying to deal with the emotional wreckage of that. And I'm sorry, that setup is so messy. Like, imagine your fiance leaves you and then you move in with the ex-boyfriend of the woman he left you for. Personally, I would simply pass away. But it makes for such a fun romance setup because Daphne and Miles are both heartbroken, both kind of humiliated, and both trying to figure out what their lives are going to look like from now on. I think one of the reasons why this was such an impactful read for me is because I found Daphne's career so interesting. She works as a children's librarian, and at heart I'm a very indecisive and confused person, but working in a library is definitely think I would find interesting. So that aspect of the book made it feel very cozy and personal to me. Also, I read this book during Hurricane Helene, and my power was out for 5 days, and I was having a really hard time at work because of everything that was going on with the hurricane. I read it by candlelight and at work when we had nothing to do because nothing was working. So this book definitely became a huge comfort for me at that time. And another thing is Emily Henry is just so good at writing romance that's funny and bantery but still has emotional depth to it. It's about having your life completely fall apart and losing this future that you thought you were going to have and how you slowly rebuild it into something new. So if you like how this messy romance setup sounds, forced proximity, roommates, opposites attract, and of course I would recommend this. Continuing on the romance train, we have a romance that is a bit of an older read for me. I read this back in 2022 and it has continued to remain one of my favorite contemporary romances of all time, even though I definitely don't read as much romance as I used to. This is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. I have the indie copy here, which looks super daunting. I mean, it says it's almost 700 pages, but a big part of it is the formatting, because the newer illustrated edition, which I lent out to a friend, is less than 500 pages. Regardless, it's still pretty thick for a contemporary romance. This book follows Vanessa, who is the assistant to Aiden Graves, and he is a professional football player who is basically the definition of emotionally unavailable. He's quiet, intense, kind of rude. Vanessa eventually quits because she's tired of being underappreciated, but then Aiden comes back into her life needing a huge favor. He wants her to marry him for practical reasons because that's something that people do. Duh. So yes, this is a marriage of convenience sports romance. But more than anything, this book made me realize my love for slow burn. If you're someone who can get bored easily once the characters get together, Mariana Zapata knows how to write for us. We get mostly tension buildup in this novel, which is why I love it so much. And I definitely wish more authors would write like this. It's hard to find now with the rise of really smutty romance novels, because I feel like a lot of books will have two love interests and they use one for the purpose of having smut early on in the book, but they can still market it as a slow burn because the real love interest doesn't happen until later. Like, girl, no, that's not slow burn. This is slow burn. And what I liked about Aiden is he's not this charming guy. He's not flirty or smooth. He's quiet, awkward, and stubborn and hard to read. But then he slowly starts showing his care through actions more than words, and I fear that did work on me. The romance feels earned because it takes so long to build that trust and actually get there. Vanessa is also really easy to root for because she has her own goals and is trying to build a life for herself outside of being someone's assistant. And of course, it's a romance. It's going to talk about the romance, but it also was about her learning her own worth and realizing she deserves to be appreciated. So if you like books where you're surviving off of tiny crumbs of affection for hundreds of pages, I would definitely recommend this one. So last but certainly not least, we're coming full circle because this book has romance, but it also has aspects of sci-fi and space, and that is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is also the only Taylor Jenkins Reid book I've finished, which feels illegal. I've started One True Loves, but I never finished it. I definitely need to though, because the movie adaptation has Philippa Sue in it, and I've been a Hamilton nerd since I was younger, so I feel like I owe it to myself to see her act in something else. So Atmosphere follows Joan Goodwin, and she is a physics and astronomy professor at Rice University. And one day she sees an opportunity to apply for NASA's space shuttle program, and she ends up training at the Johnson Space Center with this other group of candidates. And I really love the setting of this book. It takes place in the 1980s, and I think that's just a really cool backdrop for a love story. The NASA training and the ambition of these characters and the danger of space just adds so much to the emotional stakes. And Joan is also a quieter main character. She's very thoughtful and reserved, and you get to watch her slowly question what she wants from her career, her life, and love. The romance is also really tender. It's sapphic, and so it feels really tied to Joan's self-discovery. So it's not just about two people being together, but about someone becoming more honest honest with themselves because of that love. And there's also, again, that found family element with the other astronauts. They're all very ambitious and competitive, but they're also training for something incredibly high stakes. So that bond becomes really interesting. So the book has friendship and romance, and that constant reminder that while space is beautiful, it's also really terrifying. And while I've yet to finish another one of this author's books, I've heard that her stories all have this quality where the story is super readable, but it still hits you in the feels. Let me know what else I should pick up by this author. I know that some of her books are tied into like a bigger universe, so if there's a certain order you would recommend that I read them, please let me know. So those are my favorite books, at least as of right now. I'm sure this list will change as I keep on reading more, but these are the books that have stuck with me the most since I've started tracking my reading. Let me know if you've read any of these, what your favorite books of all time are, and if there's any books you think I need to absolutely read based off of this list. Also, if you liked this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I'd love to have you here while I keep talking about books, movies, and whatever else I become emotionally attached to. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.